session, we're going to start to understand what coaching is and what it isn't. There's a chance that you have heard the term coaching, seen a lot of leadership articles popping up online, and we're really going to hone in on what it is that we're talking about when we say coaching or coaching culture. We're going to learn how to recognize the benefits of coaching and identify some core mindsets and behaviors to improve your coaching skills. We're going to look at, in order to have or lead a coaching culture, how do we need to think and how do we need to act? We're going to start to distinguish when to use powerful questions versus reflective listening skills. This is a bit of the artful dance that comes along in leadership, where we learn when we really just need to be that sounding board and when we might need to step a little bit more into coaching in order to expand people's thoughts. And just like all of our other sessions, if you get done and you're really excited about continuing the conversation about coaching culture with your own team or your own leadership, you can go ahead and fill out the evaluation at the end and you'll receive some take-back tools so you can continue on with this conversation within your own organization and teams. So let's talk a little bit about why we should be focusing on creating a coaching culture. You will notice that maybe as you look at the screen, you're going to see a lot of common workplace challenges that people are experiencing within their teams right now. And what the research, ever-growing research around coaching is showing is that when you can create a consistent culture where people are being coached and there is that common mindset among the team, the organizations are seeing a reduced amount of turnover, increased employee engagement, and it's also having an impact on productivity. So you can see down there at the bottom that 70% increase in individual performance was experienced, as well as increases in both team performance and organizational performance when we're able to get into this space of coaching. There are a variety of different reasons or purposes behind choosing to go with a coaching methodology. And this can shift a little bit day to day and depending on the situation that you're working through. Sometimes we use coaching because we're trying to help the people in our span of care gain some deeper insight around their challenges or their perspectives. It can bring about a lot of clarity. We're also continuing to look at ways as leaders that we can be building up people around us by increasing their emotional intelligence. As you are coaching people, it helps them to better understand why it is that they are reacting or feeling the way that they are. And as that emotional intelligence starts to increase, what we start to notice in coaching is that people are able to actually shift their perspectives with this newfound understanding of both themselves and the situation or challenge they're looking at. Coaching is also utilized in a way for us as leaders to help our people set really clear goals, right? We don't want to lose sight of the fact that coaching has this element of action and movement. And by having these types of coaching conversations, we continue to help support people to develop an accountability mindset, which is a topic that for those of you who took Our Community Serves are familiar with us diving into a little bit more. How do we help the people that we are working with and leading to be looking at situations through the lens of taking ownership and what they do have control over? And coaching is a wonderful tool for us to be able to use in that space. Now, if we're going to be talking about coaching, it'd be helpful for us to all realize what it is that we are referring to when we use that word. So I'd love a little discussion here on what words do you associate with the term coaching? Feel free to hop off mute if you want to share. If not, Heather, if you don't mind just reading off the ones that get entered into the chat for us, that would be great. What are the words you associate with the term coaching?
We have empowering, support. Saw a conversation earlier. Yeah, Jose asking questions. Andrea said training someone. Danielle said development. Oh, you guys are fast here. Let's see. Mentorship. Carolyn said being alongside. Danielle, validating emotions, empathy.
That's great. Thank you very much, Heather. Oh, did you have a couple more come in?
Couple more. Stephanie said active listening and dialogue, goal-oriented. Tony said trust. Natalie said supporting another person's growth. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correct. I think it's Joni, thought partner with client.
I love that. And
Don't
Heather,
know.
as we're reading off those words, it really reminds me of how we're keeping the focus on the other person. We hear a lot of the walking alongside and empowering. And so when we think about coaching, it's helpful for us to kind of separate out or call out specifically what we're not referring to as we move forward. Because coaching isn't just about us, right? Sometimes we come into these situations as a leader, as a supervisor, and we feel like we need to swoop in and solve a problem, give our advice, which I also like to call bestowing our wisdom upon people, right? Because we feel like we have all of this really helpful information for them. Coaching also isn't about us wielding our authority, our rank, or our position, or our title. And it's not intended to be this top down management or oversight or professional nagging. When we think about coaching, it truly is about us being there to empower other people. It requires us to use all of the skills that you've learned in our community listens around reflective listening and bringing your full presence into that space. And that means it requires you to have a relationship with a person. Coaching is much more effective when you are engaging with someone where you have a level of trust. Now, the other piece, and Heather, I think you have a beautiful quote about this that I'm probably going to butcher, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that coaching does have to have some forward movement and action space. Otherwise, as Heather says, it's just a great conversation. And there's nothing wrong with having great conversations, but coaching is what allows people to see what the next step should be. And in that way, it means that we as coaches are focused on really helping to facilitate a learning process. And we're going to talk a little bit later on how one of the many coaching tools that are out there is helping people to really get that better understanding of their situation through using powerful questions. Now, in order for us to be effective in having a coaching culture, or for us to be modeling coaching skills, it's helpful for us to think of the fact that we need to look at both coaching mindsets and coaching behaviors. If you have one or the other, it's not very effective. If you Google a bunch of steps to take to be coaching and you do it, but you don't have a mindset around empowering others and seeing them as being capable of solving their own problems, there's a chance it's going to be very ineffective and come across as being disingenuous. On the flip side, you might have no problem being on board with the mindsets around coaching and helping to support people around you. But whether it's because you haven't developed the skills yet, or maybe you're a little bit intimidated to try out those coaching skills, so you're not showing those behaviors, then it doesn't matter how great your mindset is if nobody around you gets to benefit from you practicing those skills. So today, what we're going to do is do a little bit of a deeper dive into both coaching mindsets and coaching behaviors. When we start to look at coaching mindsets, there is a wonderful quote here from Coactive Coaching. Coaching is always grounded in the belief that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. People are capable, have their own answers, and are not in the need of fixing. And I'd love to pause here for a minute, whether it is off mute or in the chat. Somebody tell me what your reaction is to that quote. And Heather, if you don't mind, again, keeping an eye on chat comments, that would be great.
Jose already said he loves it.
One of those you want to reread like 3 or 4 times.
Katie said, trusting in people. Love that.
What other reactions are people having to the quote?
Michelle said, same, not in need of fixing. Idea that people are whole, not lacking. Michelle also added that it was more about growth as opposed to fixing. Danielle said it's inspiring because innately beliefs in people's own ability to grow themselves and have the answer inside.
Thank you very much, Heather, for reading those off. This whole idea requires us as leaders to let go of the idea that we are the expert. And if we believe this about people, if we have this mindset, we need to look at what are some additional mindsets or thoughts that we might be having that we want to look at starting to create some shifts for. So we're going to do some side-by-side comparisons of managing mindsets versus coaching mindsets. When we are focusing on managing people, sometimes we think that it is our need to fix the problem, right? We need to come in, swoop in, save the day. Where coaching is us sitting back and thinking, how can I listen so that this person that I'm empowering can uncover their own solution, right? Again, reminding ourselves that they are the expert in that space. I need to give my advice is from the managing mindset versus that you'll hear us say it a lot today, I'm not the expert. Even if you have a vast amount of experience in the topic that they are talking about, you are not fully who they are. You don't have the same experiences, background, values, or relationships that they are managing at the same time. Managing mindset of needing to tell them what they are missing. Sometimes we can be in a one-on-one session with someone and they will make a statement and we feel like it is so obvious that there is this lens that they're not seeing or something that they've not considered. But instead of us needing to be the person who points that out, a coaching mindset would believe in the person's ability to increase their own self-awareness through using some of the coaching behaviors we'll cover down the road. Now, as you think back on that quote, and Lainey, if you don't mind dropping that in the chat so it's fresh in people's minds, we're going to take a couple minutes to do a self-reflection. Think about what about this mindset shift might be challenging for you, but how could this mindset shift impact those in your span of care? And we will take a couple of minutes and then go ahead and put you in breakout rooms for you to discuss. All right, in just a couple seconds here, you're going to see a little option to join a breakout room. We'll be in your breakout rooms for about 8 minutes, and Lainey will be sending you on your way. And then when we come back, we will do a group discussion and then shift over to talking about coaching behaviors. So we'll see you in 8 minutes. All right, as we come back into the group, who's willing to come off mute and share what you talked about in your group? Or if you want to put it in the chat, Heather can read that out loud as well. And I suppose if none of the mindset shifts felt challenging for you, feel free to expand on that. Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, my camera it's not working today. So this section made me think a lot about, I'm a university professor by trade, and then a leadership coach. About what is called constructivist teaching, where instead of asking what questions, you ask how and why. So it's not what is the problem here, but how can we approach what is going on here? Or how can we think about doing this differently, right? And the example I gave for in the breakout room with Jay was there's this famous professor in California who he's a calculus teacher, and he shows up to class on the first day with a roll of toilet paper telling his students you have to calculate the volume. And they've learned how to do a true cylinder in previous courses, but have not yet learned to do an irregular cylinder like toilet paper. And they work through the whole thing in the class. And so then they have the architecture of how to solve a problem, not just the formula to solve this problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So I liked it a lot. My struggle is always twofold. Either I get really on some kind of sidetrack with in this kind of a discussion and just we like go way off track, or I'm just so excited my personality tends to kind of overload the other ones or overwhelm them.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love pulling through that idea of, in some ways, it's not about teaching to solve the problem, it's teaching to think differently. And so much of that is achieved in that coaching environment. Thank you so much. Heather, did you have one come through the chat? I thought I saw it light up.
That was just me telling Michelle I loved the how and the why.
Perfect.
But would love to hear other people come off chat or come on to chat.
Anyone else willing to share what you discussed in your group?
Hey, it's Lou. I'll share. Be more than happy to. I think what's challenging for me is, my background, military, now in law enforcement, paramilitary organization is moving from that, this this is how you need to go do things, to exploring why you need to do these things. It's so easy it's easier, I guess that's the easiest way, best way to say it is that it's just easy to say, go do this, or this is how you do something. And nobody really gets going back to Michelle's is the why. Uh, I'm just telling you to do it. You're doing it the way I want you to ultimately, instead of figuring it out for yourself.
Lee, thank you for sharing that. There's definitely a background in work organizations, both within military and policing and outside, right, of a little bit of this command and control. I gave you an order, or I told you an instruction, and you just do it. And one of the issues that can come from that sometimes is that then that group of people who are following those orders without understanding the why, or asking those questions, or solving those problems, then get moved into leadership roles, where they all of a sudden need this new skill set where they are expected to be able to solve problems and overcome challenges. And so as we talk about this coaching culture, Lee, you're right on point. We're talking about how do we start making that shift from just do it because I told you to do it, and instead teaching people, to Michelle's point, how to think. So this is kind of wrapping up the mindset portion. And now we want to shift over into talking about coaching behaviors. For any of you who are on the call and have a background in coaching, you probably think it's laughable that we're talking about this in a 1-hour lunch session, because a true intensive coach certification program takes 1 to 2 years to really dive into all of the elements and the practice that's required. We have a version of some coaching skills that get taught within our Community Transforms program. But for today, what we're going to do is just lay out 3 coaching behaviors that can be implemented by anyone, whether or not you have a coaching certificate, to help move you towards this coaching culture. And as I go through these 3, I'd like you to be thinking about which one of these behaviors do you want to focus on when you leave this call today. So this is our way of saying, don't waste your lunch hour. As pleasant as it is to be here with us, we really want you to take something tangible from this experience that you can implement immediately. The very first coaching behavior is empowering others through reflective listening. We talk about reflective listening in every single program that we offer because it plays a critically important role in being present for people, right? You need to bring your full presence into a situation where you are trying to coach someone. And in order for us to be in that space with another person, to be listening and trying to better understand what their experience is, it requires us to leave out all of the judgment. And that is not just your judgmental comments, but all of those judgmental thoughts that keep crowding into your mind, right? It means holding off on giving all of that advice that you think would be helpful and really just being present with the person. Listening is listed under a critical coaching behavior because it's through this process that we can help to uncover what the underlying needs and values are. Otherwise, we might waste a lot of time trying to address these surface problems, surface challenges, when really, if we could take the time to understand that root cause, we could save a lot of time. The second coaching behavior that we'll talk a little bit about are powerful questions. When we are interacting with a person, when might we want to try to pull from some what and how questions? And Michelle, I love that you talked a little bit about the how and why questions. So we'll take a look at this tool as well. How do we know when it would be effective for us to utilize these? And then the third component, forwarding the action and the learning of the other. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's the movement piece. How do we walk away from that session with the person you're coaching knowing this is the next step I'm going to take? Now, for some of you, reflective listening skills, the 5 skills might be really fresh in your mind. For others, it might have been a few years. So briefly, I just want to make sure that we're regrounded in what we're talking about. With reflective listening, that attending behavior means you are fully present. I want you to think about your one-on-one interactions with people. If you are practicing attending behaviors, that means your laptop is not up where you can see every new email come in. Your phone is set away where you're not seeing it go off or hearing the ring. You are fully focused on this conversation that you're engaging in. Your acknowledgements are the verbal and nonverbal cues, letting the other person know that you're tuned in. Those are kind of like your head nods. People know that you're following along. Door openers are open-ended statements that encourage the other person to keep talking without you hijacking the conversation. Say more about that. That's really interesting. Go on. Something like that that keeps them in charge of the conversation, but you're encouraging them to keep going. Silence is incredibly powerful, but it requires us both not opening our mouths sometimes and silencing all of the thoughts in our mind. If you are thinking about your next meeting or what you could be getting done if this person would just hurry up and get it all out, right? Then chances are you're missing a majority of the message. Now, the reflective responses part are the way that you actually can demonstrate the empathy that you have for the other person. You're stating back the facts and the feelings of what you think you heard. This does a few different things. One, it builds connection with the other person. And two, it helps you to make sure that you're really understanding the person's situation. If I have a team member in my office and they are really frustrated about something that happened in a meeting, I could respond with something like, it feels like you were really undermined in that moment when people kept asking you questions about your decision. You're throwing out the facts and the feelings of what you think you heard them say, and then they have an opportunity to tell you if you're getting it right. Now, this is an important piece to remember. Anytime you are coaching someone and they are experiencing heightened emotion, reflective listening is your go-to. When people are filled with emotion, they are not accessing those creative and logical parts of their brain where all of the coaching magic can happen and self-discovery and all of that. Anytime that bubble starts to rise of emotion, you want to shift back into this reflective listening stage. Let's move on to the second one. This is the powerful questions, and these are in your handout that Lainey dropped, your thought organizer that she dropped in the chat. This is a game changer for a lot of people. When you print this off, keep it on your desk, just glance at it right before you have a big phone call coming up. And this is just a list of questions that can be used to kind of help expand thinking. And you are right that the questions of what can be a little bit nuanced. Michelle, I'm hoping that as you read this list, you see some of the elements of what questions that we've pulled that are meant to expand instead of being seen as limiting. So go ahead and when you have an opportunity, read through that list and consider trying to utilize that into your workspace and conversations. These powerful questions go a long way in helping people to uncover their values, right? Understand why things are causing them to react the way that they are, why this challenge feels really, really difficult or important. So you're again increasing that emotional awareness and intelligence of that person. And it's through this uncovering that you start to see people be able to discover their own solutions. The third behavior that we're talking about is forwarding to action and learning. In a coaching session, maybe your area that you want to focus on is ways that you could deepen the action and the learning. When you start to wrap up that conversation, asking the person for that forward movement, what are you hoping for? What are some possible barriers that you think you might encounter? What else do you need for success? And one of my favorites, you might also be able to tell because it's in bold, who will do what for whom and by when? You may find yourself in one of these situations where it's very important that those expectations of the next step are really clear. What are you committing to? When will it be done? And how will we know that it's completed? So in that area, it can be a helpful tool to look back on. What we're going to do is do a monitor my motivation. So you'll have 2 minutes to jot down some thoughts before you go back into your breakout rooms. And I want you to select one of the 3 coaching behaviors that you're inspired to do more of in your workplace. Maybe for you, you really want to focus on first being fully present and reflectively listening. Or maybe you're ready to play around with some of those powerful questions to see if you can deepen learning, especially if there's a relationship with a one-on-one supervision where there's a lot of trust built. Maybe you are the person who's like, I really need to focus on getting movement with some of the people that I'm leading. And then think about what specific actions you're going to begin this week to practice more of. So go ahead and take your 2 minutes and then we'll send you to breakouts. All right, everyone, with that, Lainey's going to go ahead and put you into your breakouts. With this one, you've got 10 minutes in your breakout. So feel free to dive into that spot of the actual actions that you plan on implementing this week. Welcome back. I think we still have more people joining us. I like seeing all the smiles when people come back in. Let's go ahead and just open it up for some discussion. Maybe you're willing to share an action item that you're committing to, or if you have any other questions or thoughts on this topic. For now, let's take a few minutes to talk through that.
Katie, I feel like the biggest thing, and this comes up for me all the time, is being present. Because as soon as I go to meet with somebody, my phone's dinging, my teams are going off, I have emails that are there, and you're constantly thinking about, oh, I'm going to have all this stuff happen. You're sitting there. Is it important? Do I need to pay attention to it? So, really just shutting your brain off to the noise and being present to what you're doing, I think is so important and a super challenge in my world. So,
Danielle, it's such a real challenge. Thank you for bringing that up. It's been interesting to hear leaders finding different techniques, whether it's like the visualization of wiping their mind clean, or people who do like that deep breath before they shift focus. It's such a great reminder. Thank you. Annetta.
Thank you so much, Katie. My group was amazing. Russ and Stephanie, appreciate your feedback, and they got me up to speed, so I'll make it brief. Forward to action and learning. As I shared in my group, I'm moving into my encore season, which means that I am not retiring. I'm just going to be doing some different things, which means removing some of the hats that I've been wearing. So I need to really be careful about action, because I've gotten into this, as Russ says, that back and forth routine that we get comfortable with. And remember to create the space for new leadership, new perspectives to come safely into a room and make that transition. And also for me to still show up and be present and not just wait, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that, and then check out and go do it. So those are my thoughts. Again, thank you, Russ and Stephanie.
Sounds like you had an all-star group. And I love all of the different elements that you're pulling together there. And one that really stood out to me was this balance of being fully present, but it sounds like being fully present in a whole new way with all of the changes. That's great. Thank you. Who else?
I can talk if nobody else wants to.
Please do, Michelle, go ahead.
So what we talked about was how we approach the bigger problems, and both the implementation at the end, but how you start at the beginning. And I'm starting a new project where I am revamping a nonprofit curriculum for their adult. It's a nonprofit that works for veterans transitioning, and then designing their training curriculum for their teachers, which they don't have one yet. And we talked a lot about, my group had Jay in it, and we talked about architecture and the big picture and how you start with the dream, right? If you have no restrictions, no money isn't an object, the laws of physics don't have to be an object. Like, if you could dream this, how would you do this, right? And then going backwards, like, how can we make the dream into a reality, as opposed to starting with the restrictions, right? Like, I cannot make a floating building, for example, yet, but you can design spaces that feel airy and open and things like that, right? And it's the same with curriculum. I want to teach this skill, right? How to really look into yourself, for example, or how to have a good conversation with somebody who's not in the military. Because like I said, this program's for veterans moving into the civilian workforce. How do you have that kind of a conversation? I'm like, all right, the ideal situation, what are we doing, right? And then, okay, the reality is no one's a mind reader, right? So how do we work backwards from that? And so this week because it's starting a new project, and actually it'll be probably quite a number of weeks, there'll be a lot of questions and listening for me, because I've looked at everything that they gave me, and now I need to talk to the people who use it on all the different sides to figure out what they think is going on and what they want to go on. So that's me. But I like the building. Jay had some great examples with the architecture and putting together a building.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I just found the whole process interesting, how it was transitional like that, and how I could listen to Michelle talk about developing a curriculum and a teaching guide, and then say, wow, that sounds just like how we design a building or how we design a space. And finding something relative like that for me is a great learning tool in itself. So.
Thank you so much, Jay. And I love that you two found a commonality in what feels initially maybe like some very different fields. And Michelle, I just have to say, I feel like we could have a 2-hour conversation just geeking out about instructional design and designing content. So I appreciate getting to hear from your perspective on that. And I think too, with that idea of dreaming of what could be possible if there were no restrictions is a great technique to utilize within coaching, right? You're trying to shift their thinking and change their perspective and open their thought process. So what a beautiful space to create for people to just kind of get a different lens. I'm going to move us forward to talk about our next steps. And our next steps are a little bit about what do you do next with the content, but also what might you want to do if you want to continue this conversation with your own organization. So as you just did, when you're focusing on me, for those of you who've been a part of these sessions before, we look through the lens of me, we, and us. You've already started to identify the coaching mindsets or behaviors that you're going to focus on following this session in order to become a stronger, more self-aware leader. The we part is about the team or the organization that you work with. So one is going back and actually implementing those skills that you decided you're going to focus on. You also might be in a position where you're ready to take the take back materials that will be available to you to continue on the conversation. What would it look like to engage your team or your leadership in some dialogue around what would it look like for us to start adapting some of these coaching mindsets and behaviors? The us is when or if your organization reaches a point to say, we are really interested in learning about the structures that can be available and in place to help us start to become a full caring workplace. Again, one of our major goals as an organization is to not just say, hey, here are all of the things that you as a leader need to do to be effective and to make people feel cared for. Instead, we partner with organizations intentionally to help them design or to deliver content that has been evidence-based around building trust, creating and valuing this culture of learning, practicing and integrating recognition and celebration to help your people feel seen, valued, and heard. How do you equip your leaders to have intentional connection points so it's not just this exchange of information all the time? And meaningful work. How do we connect the critically important work that your organization is doing with the values and individual meaning and purpose that people on your team are looking for? So for those organizations that say, we really want to look at how do we get more of that within our organization, that's always an option that we would like to explore with you. We do that through providing the 3 foundational courses that you see on here. Everyone in your organization or on your teams has the ability to take our Community Listen, which focuses on yourself and building better relationships. Our Community Serves, where we work with teams and organizations to focus on their culture. How do we move from me-centric mindsets and behaviors to we-centric mindsets and behaviors? And then your organizational leaders who have the ability to influence strategy or are supervising others can participate in our Community Transforms, where we really start to look at how do we strategically integrate all of these skills from Listens and Serves into our organization so that one, everyone in the organization feels cared for and supported and excited about coming to work, and 2, that it will long outlive any one leader as they transition into their next role. All of this continues to be supported with continuous learning sessions and our app on our phone. So there's continual support for trying to get that behavior change to occur. So what next? First of all, we always encourage you to come back for our next Courageous Leader series. The next panel, and Lainey will get that information out to you for attending, is going to be about this creating a culture of coaching. And you'll get to hear about their real live examples of how they've used it, what's gone well, what's been challenging. If you're interested in bringing a training of a different topic to your team, there's an option at the end of the eval for you to go ahead and complete and ask for us to reach back out. The QR code there has a link to the survey for you to fill out. We promise we make it as short as possible, but we always want to look at ways that we could be making this better. At the end, again, you have the option to request the take back tools. That is our final part of our session. We are so appreciative that you took that hour out of your day to spend time with us and to continue learning. I will stay on for a few minutes if people have questions. Otherwise, we hope to see you back on the next panel. Bye, everyone.